The winter that wouldn't end came quietly. It crept under doors, cracked windows, and through the thin walls of farmhouses that once smelled of bread and smoke. The Great Depression had already stolen jobs, savings, and certainty. Then it took the warmth. Coal was too expensive, firewood too scarce. Families huddled together in rooms where the breath hung like fog. But in that bitter stillness, something remarkable stirred. People began to invent warmth out of almost nothing. They didn't have thermostats or central heating. They had hands. Willpower and scraps of knowledge passed between neighbors. What followed wasn't just survival, it was a quiet engineering revolution born from desperation. These are the forgotten tricks that kept a generation alive when the world turned cold. They called it fire without flame. When there was no coal to burn through the night, families learned that heat could be stored instead of wasted. Bricks, irons, and stones became secret furnaces. They'd heat them in the stove during daylight, wrap them in old towels, and slip them under blankets or into boots. A single brick could radiate gentle warmth for hours, enough to keep a child's feet from freezing. Some families placed flat irons beneath their mattresses. Before bed, the same irons once used for pressing. Clothes became midnight guardians against frost. Long before anyone spoke of thermal mass or energy storage, these people had mastered it instinctively. They didn't know the physics. They just knew the feeling of saving one ember for morning. In every home that glowed with a little borrowed heat, ingenuity replaced luxury. Then there was the quilt code, a language stitched by tired hands. Quilts weren't decorations. They were survival maps. Women pieced together layer upon layer of thin fabric, leaving tiny pockets of air trapped between. Those invisible layers turned thread into insulation. The patterns, stars, log cabins, 9 patches, weren't just beautiful. They were practical geometry, spreading warmth evenly across the body. Families hung quilts over doors and windows to stop drafts, stacked rugs on floors, and wore multiple shirts instead of one thick coat. They discovered the layer illusion, that thin materials, when stacked, trapped heat better than any single heavy one. The science was simple but profound. Warmth wasn't about weight, it was about space. In a time of scarcity, even air became a tool for survival. Each quilt told 2 stories, one of art and one of physics disguised as love. When fuel disappeared entirely, people turned downward, to the ground itself. They learned to steal heat from the earth. Basements, storm cellars, and half-buried sheds became shelters of surprising comfort. The soil held a steady temperature year-round, warmer than the air above. Families sealed windows with rags soaked in lard, packed mud around doorframes, and moved their sleeping spaces underground. Farmers discovered that if they blocked wind with hay bales and stacked snow against outer walls, the very things that symbolized hardship could become insulation. Nature, when studied closely, offered quiet mercy. Decades later, engineers would call it geothermal energy. But in the 1930s, it was just common sense. The earth gives back to those who listen. Still, warmth wasn't always found in soil or stone. Sometimes it flickered from the smallest flame, the candle oven trick. A tin can, a clay pot, or an old pail could become a miniature heater. Families placed a candle beneath an inverted pot, letting the metal absorb and radiate heat. In a closed room, that faint glow could raise the temperature enough to thaw fingers or dry, damp clothes. It was fragile magic, light too weak to boil water, yet strong enough to keep hope alive. Children learned to sit close but not too close, hands outstretched like worshippers before a single star. What modern people rediscovered on the internet, as the terracotta heater was once an act of daily faith. They didn't call it innovation. They called it getting through another night. But the most powerful heat of all came from the body itself. In hard winters, people practiced what they jokingly called the body heat economy. Families slept side by side, layered like pages in a book. The youngest and oldest were placed at the center, where shared warmth circulated most. Some even shared barns with animals, drawing comfort from the steady breath of cows and horses. Neighbors rotated sleeping spots near stoves so everyone got a turn in the warm zone. In those cramped rooms, warmth became communal currency, passed through trust and touch. They understood something we've nearly forgotten, that comfort grows when it's shared. Isolation chills faster than cold air. Togetherness, quite literally, kept them alive. Not all of these tricks were physical. Some lived in the rhythm of their days. People rose with the sun to chase natural light and saved every drop of lamp oil. They cooked and baked all at once to capture leftover heat from the oven. They sealed unused rooms and gathered only where life happened, near the kitchen, near the stove, near each other. Their world shrank to one glowing corner, but within it there was laughter, storytelling, even music. Scarcity forced connection, and connection generated a kind of emotional warmth that no amount of fuel could replicate. It wasn't comfort in the modern sense, it was meaning, and when spring finally came, they didn't throw those lessons away. They stored them like seeds. They knew that luxury could vanish, but knowledge stayed. They taught their children to bank fires properly, to dry wood in advance, to never waste a scrap of fabric or a breath of heat. For them, survival wasn't an act of fear, it was an act of memory. They had lived through the season when warmth was handmade. We live differently now. Thermostats hum, walls are sealed tight, and we forget the language of cold. But somewhere in the bones of every old house, those lessons linger. The bricks that once held heat, the quilts that once guarded sleep, the cellars that once kept families breathing through the dark, all still whisper the same truth, that warmth isn't bought, it's built. It comes from patience, from awareness, from refusing to surrender to the elements. Your grandparents didn't just survive winter, they learned to collaborate with it. They turned hardship into invention, isolation into unity, and scarcity into art. Their homes were laboratories of resilience. Every ember, every stitch, every shared breath was a quiet defiance against the cold. They proved that comfort doesn't depend on abundance. It depends on understanding. So the next time frost paints your window and the world outside feels unkind, remember them. Remember the candle's glow that could fool a blizzard, the quilts that held both air and love, the earth that offered warmth when the sky withheld it. Remember that survival is not a relic of the past. It's a skill of the heart. The Great Depression may have ended, but its lessons still breathe in every home that seeks warmth not from machines, but from imagination, because the truth your grandparents knew still holds. When the cold comes for everything you have, the heat you make yourself is the only kind that lasts.